every time we come with an idea, we just get a no. We don't know why. And so what if they had the why? What if they had access to the why? And then they're like, oh, okay, well, we don't have the budgets for this. I get it. And so therefore, let me think more entrepreneurial way or have more ingenuity to overcome this problem another way. And that builds that psychological ownership from the get-go.
Who's coming along to Underground in February? It's New Zealand's most exciting festival of soil, food and farming, and it's once again back at Greystone Wines in North Canterbury. Looking at how things are shaping up, it's definitely going to be an epic couple of days out that you don't want to miss. There's going to be interactive talks on soil health, adaptive grazing, agroforestry and farm planning, plus music, glamping, field walks, and just some incredible food. Honestly, it's a festival for people who like to get excited about topsoil and a really good grazing wedge. This year's speakers include John Chester from The Biggest Little Farm, the man, the myth, the legend, Darren Doherty, and an epic lineup of local legends like Russ and Charlotte Heal, Jodie Roebuck, Nick Gill, John King, and Jules Matthews, plus much more. I'm going to be hosting some talks on the economics of regen transition and ecosystem payments, and as always, helping out with the infield soil sessions. So, Underground Festival is on the 18th and 19th of February 2026, and you can purchase 1 or 2 day tickets that are now live up on undergroundfestival.co.nz. Hopefully, I'll see you there. Nick, how are you today?
Good, mate. Good. Great to be here.
It's great to have you on. We got connected through Greg Hart, who's a wonderful man up in the North Island on his regen farm, and we kind of really hit it off on that first call. So I thought, what better than to have you on today and have a good yarn about the field of work that you work in. So has there been a particular moment or experience that has shifted your view on leadership?
Yeah, massively. It actually began, 7 to 8 years ago. A little bit of a long story. I'll try and shortcut where I can, but I think the essence is quite important to share. It always is when you're trying to tell a story about what truly drives you. So I was working for a company back in the day, and in the corporate environment, and I was performing well. I was ticking off my boxes. I was punching well above my weight, delivering results, etc. And the future was looking pretty good for me. In terms of on paper and results, it was looking good. However, when I was, and I'm being completely vulnerable here, when I was in the car ride back home most days, I was in tears. I was depressed. I was not feeling myself. I was feeling lost, etc. And I know I wasn't the only one. My colleagues were feeling the same, but no one was prepared to voice that. And in that moment, I was like, this can't be right. Like, here I am delivering everything that was set out to be done. And not only that, I'm over-delivering for my age and so forth. Why is this happening to me? And then the nail in the coffin really came when a crisis moment happens in life. And this tends to happen when a big shift in worldviews come your way. It tends to be triggered by a crisis. And Saturday morning, woke up to a bunch of texts that came through, and we realised that one of our mates hadn't responded. And the other texters came through and said, hey, have you checked the news? Like, something's not right around the corner from you guys. Have you checked on our mate? And it turns out there was an accident that happened, and we went on site that morning to see if it was our mate, and it was. We identified his body and so forth, and that was heavy news. That's one of the first big losses for me in my life. And from that moment, obviously, those 2 days, that weekend was heavy. People at work knew about it too, so they were conscious of me weren't going back to work on Monday. I had a meeting with my manager at the time, and the first thing we did was to set the objectives of the week, and that took the first a good 30 minutes or so. And then at the end of it, he asked, how was I feeling? I burst into tears straight away in the office, and from that moment, it was like, it was not his fault in that scenario. It's the structure and system that created that environment. And in my mind, I was like, holy heck, there's 2 wake-up calls for me. One is that success doesn't actually come without meaning to contribute something bigger than yourself. And 2, how have we got to a point where humanity is actually coming second best to a lot of these machine situations of setting the objectives and so forth. So that was a big wake-up call for me, and I knew there was something more to life and how we can actually bring it all together.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and thank you very much for sharing your vulnerability with us. And that is quite a big life-changing event. So if you're looking ahead, how do you see the future of business management changing if that is kind of the corporate setup now? Do you see it evolving going forward?
Yeah, massively. Perhaps some context to this as well. So yes, and the studies have shown too, over the last 10,000 years in particular, humanity has evolved in sudden leaps. We're not like a progressive plant that evolves into a tree and so forth over time. We're like a caterpillar that evolves into a cocoon and then a butterfly. For some reason, whenever crisis management or crisis happens or tensions build up within the way of human life, we all feel it as well, by the way, and then we think of like what new consciousness is going to solve that problem, because the problem that we've created is created by the existing consciousness. And what studies have shown is that this has happened every time we go through a consciousness upgrade, in a way. It comes with a new way of working. So we figure out a new way of designing our organizations, our structures and so forth, ways of working, ways of collaborating. And the way forward is looking at, and it's not too radical, although it probably will be a lot of people's minds, but it's actually decentralizing our structures. The way of hierarchy today, or put it this way, what we've inherited of traditional hierarchy today is designed for a different era. It's designed for an era perhaps 50 plus years ago, where complexity around us wasn't as complex as it was. For instance, like we're not receiving 50 emails on a Saturday, or let alone automation processes or AI coming to the picture, any of this. So the surroundings of our structure is actually growing a lot faster than our structures or organization structures can actually handle. And therefore, we resort to a lot of like, what's the silver bullet that's going to solve this problem or solve this tension and so forth. And the thing is, like, what if we actually looked from within the structures to actually allow the fluidity, like role modeling nature, for instance, where they can sense and respond and adapt to the complexity around us? Because how complex is nature? And the funny thing is, if we look in a bigger scope of it, there's so many complexity scenarios around us, like our brain cells. We've got 80 billion brain cells, but there's not one brain cell that tells others what to do. Again, nature, whenever there's no rain, you don't see two trees come together to organize the allocation or which rain goes where when it does rain. They sense and respond, they coexist. And what they thrive on is natural hierarchies rather than one hierarchy in place. So it's allowing the strengths and passions of each of the organisms to respond accordingly. What if we design that in the organizations today, all moving towards a purpose? That's something that's greater than ourselves and something that we all believe in. Like, that's intrinsic motivation as well. So yes, in the way forward, distributed authority, it brings about psychological ownership from the team, and it's going towards an advancement of a cause bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And you mentioned crises there. Do you think we're on the cusp of that at the moment? Because it feels like the way in which we're working is changing right now, and people are wanting to change the way in what they work, but we're also seeing crises around our food and health systems, many systems that we are involved with as human beings. So do you think we are on that cusp right now?
Yeah, massively. I'll put it in perspective of the organizations as it is. So studies upon studies are coming through. Like, you have your top line and the senior leaders or the CEOs, the founders, whatever term you want to use, they're carrying at least 90% of the emotional weight, the risk and the liability of the company. You have your middle managers that spend more than half of their time on admin than coaching their staff members, which is the whole reason why they were in that role. And then you have your frontline members, which this one shocked me, is their frontline members spend, I believe they're only utilising 23% of their skills and experiences that they can actually offer. But the irony of this is that those at the frontline are actually the closest to the pride and pain of what's happening daily. They're the ones that can actually tune in to the opportunities multiple times a day, but yet they don't have the power or the definitive measures to actually act on those or even report that back up the line. So and when it does, sometimes that context gets lost to the very top, because when it's only at the very top that a senior leader can converge all the information. Yet, and it's like an unwritten rule, like these senior leaders need to work extreme amount of hours, have extreme amount of pressures, and then given this compensation or remuneration package to say, hey, this is your value for dealing with all this situation comes your way. But it's not really designed that way. But they have to make a decision when all these lines converge, because if they don't, it's like a production line. The line stops. But the thing is, like, they could wake up in the morning in a bad mood. Like, it's so simple. Or they may not have the right context in front of them to make the right decision. Or whatever the case is, they're too far away from the pride and pain of what's actually happening at the front lines. And don't even get started on the politics and the bureaucracy that comes through as well between sharing the information up and down the ladders. And here's the thing is like we're coming to a point where tension is obvious with high turnovers, bringing on board the younger generation into the industries. Like younger generations not looking for, yes, it's important, money, etc., but it's not the main driver. It's money, recognition, success. That's a different worldview. That they're actually more looking for autonomy and meaning to actually like contribute something more meaningful and bigger than themselves. What's another example? It's absenteeism's another one. It's and yet obviously burnout. Like burnout's probably one of the main key highlighted words these days. So again, there's so many of these tensions, and it's not industry specific. Here's the caveat. It's across every industry you come into. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's a theme here. There's a theme that whatever, all these tensions are starting to now accumulate together and building up. And we can all feel it. It feels like everyone's pulling the short straw. And yet the thing is that you cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created in the first place. So it begs the question, like, what's the next consciousness to help lead the next evolution of structures that we're coming into? And so one last thing, an organization will never outgrow its leaders, ever. For instance, and I'll use an example here, if a leader has the worldview or belief that people are motivated out of like money, recognition, and success, they're going to create structures that reflect that. So what I mean by that is like, for instance, individual bonus targets, or if you work overtime, you get paid more, or if you, if you perform well, you get the next promotion, etc. Then that's going to drive the behaviors differently. So the behaviors that you're going to start to see from the team is more like those that will cut corners to achieve the year-end results or year-end targets to get their bonus. They'll also look good in front of their boss in terms of winning an argument in front of instead of their employee or colleagues to win that. And so therefore, like all the years, rather than solving the problem, they're trying to solve their own promotion. And then it's going to change the culture as well. So the culture is now going to be one that's going to be driving competition or valuing competition over collaboration, and then valuing individual performance over team collaboration. But the last thing is that actually then goes back up to the senior leader, and then now the senior leader is saying, see, I told you, like people are motivated out of money, recognition, and success. But all that's really happened is that they've just created that system that reaps what it sows, with that consciousness or belief system in place. So yeah, as a context, it's fascinating how we're coming into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if that is the leader's consciousness and the way in which they operate, and they're not aware outside of, like, there is other ways of doing things, how do we create that within a business, whether it be a farm, ag supply, or could be any sort of business in the world? How do you shift that? Because that's pretty hard for them if their mind isn't like open to that or aware of that opportunity.
Yeah, massively. First of all, it's identifying that they're not the problem. Yeah, that's the thing here. It's just a tension. It just needs to be addressed, whether it's good or bad, right or wrong. And the why behind all of this, to frame up the picture here as to because this is evolution. It's human evolution that's come into play here. So, for instance, and I'll try and fast forward this, but I think this context is important. 10,000 years ago, for instance, hierarchy started to come about here. So rather than your tribal groups where the elderlies started to lead and had more of the moral authority within their groups, they then had a breakthrough that happened, and we had one alpha leader in charge, and they call this the metaphor of the wolf scenario. And this alpha leader was the only decider. So basically one top-down division of labor was created, and I say you do. They figured out there's a motivation of fear that comes into this. So and again, we see this in today's world. It's actually more predominant within your mafias, your gangs, and so forth. But then even still, we have this within our DNA. I applied it the other day. Or like, for instance, if a civil war happened, someone came into your house, you're not exactly going to invite them for a cup of tea. Like you're probably going to apply that because that's within our DNA. Then 6,000 years post that, you have what we call the amber sector, and then focus on conformity, order, structure. So for what happens this year is going to happen next year. So change is very much not a favoritism of theirs. But they described it as military, the metaphor, and which makes sense. And they built in more layers of hierarchy. So they actually learned from the previous consciousness, saying that the previous consciousness created structure and order and power. Now we need to build more layers of hierarchy, and we need to now create more structure around us so we can scale some of the things. So, like for instance, pyramids came to life back then, and so forth. Now they believe, and they also realize that there's a motivation out of guilt versus fear. So now that you've figured out two ways of navigating conversations, or at least driving people to do things to be motivated. Fast forward again, 300 years ago was the next worldview that was created from the problem that needed to be solved. And they call this the orange sector. Now they define the metaphor to this as a machine, but their worldview is also achievement. So the idea here is that people's self-worth is now attached to money, recognition, success, merit. So basically, like a janitor can become a CEO right now, whereas the previous worldview is more focused on you're born into seniority and so forth. And that's how you establish your presence. So this orange metaphor, or orange, which became very much predominant after World War II as well, is again driven by success, money, recognition, and so forth. And then focused on shareholders versus stakeholders. So, and the funny thing is, when I say the machine jargon or the machine metaphor that comes to it, you can actually hear it in the language of people in their worldview. So, for instance, in a meeting or discussion, you'll hear them say input, output, efficiency, effectiveness, cascade, engine one, engine two. Like it's really fascinating, like shifting gears. It becomes part of the language. And so that gives it an indication as to what predominant worldview they're sitting in. Now, here's the thing. This worldview created unprecedented life expectancy, unprecedented wealth, and so forth. So there is a lot that's come from it. And each of these worldviews have provided benefits to, obviously, the evolution of humanity, hence why we've evolved. The thing is, though, it's come with the shadow. The shadow to this is that because it's a machine metaphor, machine jargon, it neglects the soul of humanity. And therefore, basically we're purchasing or buying things that we think is going to make us look wealthier, healthier, popular, whatever the case is. But really, all our needs are basically met as it is. And then the second one is that, and this is quite a heavy shadow too, is that a lot of people go up the ranks of the hierarchy until they get to the very top, and then they realize this wasn't what it was made out to be. The dream of becoming the top leader isn't the dream they thought they would have, and therefore the question comes to themselves, like, what was all that sacrifice really worth? Is this what I'm put on this planet to do? That's a terrifying question to have. And what tends to happen is that with all that successful wealth, so to speak, they allocate that money to charities or non-for-profits and social ventures and so just to remove that guilt. So again, in the shadow from that created the next worldview, which is more predominant in the 1970s, 1980s era. They call this the green sector or green worldview. And the reason this green worldview that came to life is, again, now looking at the metaphor of a family. So it's learned from the shadows of orange and taking with them that, hey, we need to focus on the culture, we need to focus on the people, we need to focus on empowerment and listening to each other and so forth. So that's the focus with this worldview that came to life. And so what they've done is that with that triangle, they flipped it. So basically they're trying to empower the frontline members as much as they can to make decisions. The thing is, though, is that if the frontline members are trying to go left, who are close to the prime playing what's going on, and then the senior leaders want to go right, that creates decision paralysis in the middle. And what happens then is that there's unsavory discussions and tension that builds up because they're stuck and they're trying to make everyone feel heard and everyone feel equal. But that's where tension comes from. And so they haven't quite figured out how to actually release that momentum as much as they're trying to empower their staff. And they're the ones that say, you can hear it in the language as well, like they're saying when they describe themselves, like we're like a family, or we're like a community, we're like a village, and so forth. And so yeah, again, and when have you ever heard of a functional family? and if I had a boss and so forth, is he really my father? In that dynamic as well. So again, there's that tension there that really needs to be addressed. Now, to get to answer your question now is what is the next worldview that's coming? So each worldview is learned from the rest. This next one they call Teal. So the Teal has actually looked at that design or looked at that conscious beforehand and said, you know what, we actually need to unleash not just one natural hierarchy, but natural hierarchies everywhere. And so you can get the sense now that the metaphor of this is actually a living ecosystem or a living organism as such. And the idea is, how can we actually get this structure of the business to be self-management as one of the major breakthroughs. The second breakthrough is wholeness. So allowing not just our rational side, cognitive side to come to the table, we actually got so much more of who we are. Like we've got a spiritual side, emotional side, and so forth. Like good luck having an emotional discussion or spiritual discussion in the previous worldviews. It just wouldn't quite fit in. So, and then the last and not least is, how do we actually get this organism or organization to be a living purpose? Like how do we bring it to life as if it helps guide decision making and so forth? So for context, that Teal is the next evolution going forward. And what Teal does, though, is that it's not saying one of the worldviews is better than the other. It's simply saying that from red to green, each of these worldviews has a strength to it. It's just incomplete without each other. And what Teal does, it looks at these worldviews and says, what's the right worldview to solve the complexity of this situation at hand, rather than having one worldview thinking this is the right worldview to solve it. So, long story of long, but so the idea is to bring the context of the bigger picture in here, that this is actually evolution of the way we're progressing forward. And it's not an individual problem. It's not an individual tension. It's a collective, whether we like it or not. Basically, it's going forward this direction.
No, that's very comprehensive, and it's obviously very passionate about what you do. So, Nick, do you want to give us a bit of before we dive more into the Teal framework, do you want to give us a bit of background on who you are and how you've come to be working in this framework?
Yeah. It probably helps, doesn't it? I've got, so back in the day, so during that story at the start where I was talking about that real crisis moment in my life, I realized there was definitely more to give here. And I knew within me that my motivations were becoming very extrinsic. So again, that's probably a great example. That orange worldview I described it as, I was heavily predominant within that world, where I was performing on paper and so forth, and yet I was neglecting this question within me, like what's all this sacrifice really worth? So by answering that question, I finally came across these studies of Teal management that came through, and as I was reading through it, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a deal breaker. Like I didn't realize, not one, it's not just theory, but there's actually so many organizations out there today, scaled from 10 employees to 100,000 employees, that's moving to self-management as a structural process. And it's not just, and across multiple countries as well, dealing with different cultures, different worldviews, etc. So basically came across this and I was like, wow, this is, whether the planet likes it or not, basically, this is my calling. I need to make a difference here. And the thing is that it's not new news to us. That's the catch. I feel like we all sense, again, with tension, we sense that. It's just putting it into words and perspectives, that there's actually another way to solve this problem with a different consciousness. And the thing is, it's like a wave or waves coming through. A wave will come in, it will rise, it will crash, it will retreat. It will come in, it will rise, it will crash, retreat. It's exactly what happens every time when this tension becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a few of us that come in as a starting block to try and drive this new consciousness. We'll face rejection, we'll face disbelief, and then we'll withdraw. Then we'll come in with a bigger wave. We'll face rejection, we'll face disbelief, then we'll withdraw, until eventually that wave will overcome that problem or overcome that tension. Then it becomes the norm, so to speak, until the next wave comes in. And again, if you think it sounds repetitive and frustratingly annoying actually hearing myself say it, but it's true. Like that's how nature operates. It's how they do it over and over again for millions of years. And then we ask ourselves the question, like, is this really possible? But then 300 years ago, we were ruled by kings and queens and high-level aristocrats, and yet people back then were come up with the idea of self-elected governments. And they faced disbelief back then, and now look at our system. So it's just simply where our consciousness is heading towards, and it requires a few to hold the majority to begin with.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think before we dive a little bit deeper, are you able to give a layman's term around what self-management would actually look like in a business? And then we can dive into, all the facets of how it works in, agriculture and any business.
Yes, yeah, yep. So self-management essentially is distributed authority. So it's replacing, not removing, replacing the hierarchy that's in place now, and it's now creating a new framework, a new structure that's allowing people to make decisions at the front lines. So basically, like, they are the owners of the business. They have full psychological ownership of their roles, and they take pride in their work. And then basically the thing is, like, okay, so how are decisions made? What does recruitment look like? What does salaries look like? And so forth. And these are where the frameworks come in to help structure that all together so that everyone is thriving within. So very much like an ecosystem.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really think there's something to this in empowering your staff to be able, by giving them that opportunity to make decisions and not having to go up those chains of management, particularly in bigger businesses. Do you see that as quite a result that comes out of this shift?
Yes, massively. So some of the tensions, for instance, like the younger generation looking for autonomy and meaning, like tick, very quickly. Like this model allows them to have that full ownership of their roles and responsibilities and have a direct impact on how they can add value to the system with their clients or products or service. Having a purpose at the center, because if you have no manager or boss, what guides 100,000 people in this process? And the thing is that it's a mission statement, it's a purpose, it's the why behind the business, which, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but 100 years ago plus, or whatever the case is, businesses were created to advance quality of life, whether it's people, planet, and yet somewhere along the lines we've misplaced that. And again, it's rather than intrinsic motivation, which with the purpose in mind, it now becomes extrinsic. So it looks at, driving market share, top line, bottom line, the P&L, driving share price, innovation. Like, it's a fear tactics. Like, if we don't create this product, a competitor's going to create it on behalf, and we're going to lose share. So the idea, though, is that how do we bring this purpose back to life, then guide everyone in the journey they need to? And I'm talking about, rather than just being hollow words on the reception wall, it's now like, how does it actually come into your decision making? How does it come into your board meetings? How does it come into your conflict resolution? Like, hey, let's pause for a second there. If our purpose was in the room right now, what would it say? What would it not say? Like, it sounds airy-fairy, but it's like, but yeah, what else guides our decision making anyway? It's our own cognitive thoughts, and we try and bring perspectives in. So what's different than having a purpose in the same place? In context of that, it's absolutely, it solves a lot of the tensions today. And here's the thing, is that this structure speeds up decision making by at least 3 times without losing control. It takes away the capacity, bandwidth stretch that our leaders have at the moment. It enables a culture where people turn up to work, where they can deliver the best work of their lives and love doing it. And it's created an environment where people don't want to leave. Like, again, it sounds utopia, but if you bring this all to life, like, this structure can enable that. So the hard part is, what's the catch? So the catch is that it comes down to our worldviews. The example before, if you believe people are motivated by main recognition success, that gives you a different outcome and structures and so forth. If you believe the worldview you have is there's a right and a wrong, or power is the one that keeps things in check and control, or another one is, so it depends on your worldviews. But if your worldview is that you believe people are motivated to out of trust and purpose, they can make a difference and so forth, all of a sudden you look at the structure and you're like, this feels right, this is it. If you have a different worldview, then you might look at that a little bit differently and think, like, you know what, that's a little bit airy-fairy, it's too soft for me and so forth. So it depends on the worldviews of the leaders. Once you have that worldview in place, though, that leader just holds the space. They hold the space for the framework to work. That's their role. The rest of their job, they can pursue their passion projects. They can do whatever they like to add value to the system, to where it needs to grow and to adopt and sense and respond. So yeah, obviously more context to it, but that's generally the crux of it.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because if we bring it to an agricultural sense, it's quite a traditional industry, and this is quite a shift around, I guess there's a lot of farmers who are probably reluctant people managers. They own these businesses that have grown or taken over family businesses, and they actually haven't had exposure to how to run a business or the coaching around it. So how could they encourage, I guess, this the self responsibility of their staff and
Yeah.
actually openness within the business and creating trust to actually delegate some of that work?
Yeah. Yeah. Massive. Okay. Great question.
Well, not
It
the
starts
work, but I guess the decision making.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It starts with the why. So for the clients right now, it's been a fun journey. We will not start the integration until the leaders are extremely clear on what their why is. For instance, it could be one sentence if they want to answer something, which again links to the purpose of the business, why they get up in the morning, why should anyone care, so forth. Like it makes a big difference because that's the infinite mindset that Simon Sinek and those talk to as well. Once you have the why set, then it's the story. What's the story that truly drives them to make this decision may happen? And the reason I say story is because it could be a poem, etc., but stories are the most powerful and purposeful ways of communicating to people, bring them on the journey. Like, for instance, someone could tell me a story right now about what truly drives them to make a difference. I've never spent a day in their shoes to know what they're experiencing, yet I can feel the emotion they've gone through or going through. I can connect with that and resonate with that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I now know you 10 times more than I did 10 minutes ago. Like I can resonate with that. And you have my buy-in. Like this is amazing. I understand more of who you are. And I'll give an example, like with one of the clients at the moment. He's in an industry right now that I would say is pretty set in its ways, very set in its ways. And we went through the why session with him, and his why or his story was extremely powerful. It had nothing to do with the construction industry. It had something bigger than that. It was linking back to financial freedom and personal freedom in order for people to pursue something they believe in. And so then he was like, wow, this is it. Like then we linked that back to his business within the industry, and his business is now the vehicle to unleash that within the people. So it's connecting the dots. But now that we have the why and the story connected, that then makes it easier to then share that back to the team. So it's basically saying, team, we're going through a radical journey right now, or about to transition something. It is revolutionary in its own way, but here's why. And if you go through that why process, then all of a sudden the team are going to have more buy-in to your journey straight away. And then at the end of it, you're like, well, and now we've got to figure out that what and the how. You've already got that in place now. Like you got the buy-in from the team to saying, oh, I get why we're doing this. Now let me help you with the why, or let's figure this out together as a why and how we're going to bring this to life. So that's the kickoff stage. And then then you figure out so we can do this beforehand, but like the psychological ownership of the team members to start off with is an amazing starting point. If it's high, you can go fast. You can integrate as much. Like we've got a client right now that's just shock therapy. Like basically did the why of the team and was like, look, I know why we're doing this, and I need your help with the what and the how. And so therefore he can do that because ownership was high. If the ownership is lower, then you start a little bit slower. That's all. Because what happens is if you start fast and the ownership is low, people will take the freedom over the responsibility. And that's just the natural way. So that's a balancing act to figure out first. And then you figure out where the easiest unlocks are within the business. It doesn't have to be complicated. Like if it's decision making to speed up that, then great. Like here's a practice, try this now and get the team to evolve it. If it's self-correcting systems, like rather than trying to put rules in place, like you never see an environment or a tree that comes out of the rule book and says, team, you can't do this, you can't do that. They self-correct. And you think of our body, our organism, if our temperature goes to 38 degrees, it will self-correct back to 36, whatever the natural balance is. So the idea, though, is that figure out where the biggest unleash of energy unlock is, start there, get momentum, build it, and see what that reps in. And that'll unlock the next one, like a dam with a crack on behind the wall. Once you crack that dam, what's the most water that flows through? So it doesn't have to be complicated at all.
Yeah, no, I think you've touched on a whole lot of really good points there, but I think the really key one is just finding that small crack first and just working there, especially if this is a big jump for you in the way or adopting a new management style. I'm working through with a farmer at the moment, something similar, and I think he thought we were going to do all these fantastic things around business, and I'm like, actually, no, we need to get back to the why you're doing this, and then we can actually
Yeah.
build your business around this, and then how do we create a shared purpose for your staff? And then if they have that responsibility and buy into it, then you will feel more comfortable delegating them because they're
Yeah.
actually on the journey with you. And I think, yeah, it just came in, had to be someone else coming in just to kind of crack that open for him. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, let's not do anything big. Let's just do some small things and
Yeah.
just repeat them, get the reps in, and then we can grow from there.
Yeah, 100%, building that muscle and to strengthen. And so you were holding the space for him. And here's the thing: is that like an avalanche was created from a snowball, and a snowball was created from snowflakes. So and to get something that really is believable to happen is actually bringing this all together. Like starting with momentum, with how many leaders or how many organizations, doesn't matter what industry, is coming on the journey, but then listening to each other, feeding off each other, learning and lifting and shifting and adopting. And it's like, oh, you did it this way. Because here's the thing, I could give all the best practices that's in the world right now around how to do decisions, even self-set salaries, compensation, whatever the case is. But those ideas came from different countries, different organizations, etc. Like, they all learn from each other. There's not one industry that mastered everything in one go. So again, yeah, but then and there's another ways of like, how do we hold the space for each other to make that transition? I had a call this morning where, because here's the dynamic too, in a self-managed environment, there's no more parent-child relationship. There's no more parent-child dynamic that's happening right now. What's happening is that you actually create an environment where people are forced to be adults. Which, don't get me, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like, didn't we leave school like years ago? And yet here we are for the rest of our lives trying to be in this parent-child dynamic. And it's like, hang on, we are trustworthy adults that are creative, intelligent enough to make decisions, and we will learn and we will make mistakes, and that's part of being human. So having that as a fundamental assumption within the structures of our businesses is also key as well. The idea, though, is that how do you, again, hold the space for this to proceed, and let it fly, because it becomes the best accidental learning environment you could ever ask for. Like, if someone woke up in the morning, they're inspired to go to work, they believed in the purpose, they could see the difference they're making with the client's smile on their faces, or sad when they're not happy, and then they had the power to make a difference or decision about that. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of any. I would love to work for an environment like that. And what happens here is that for someone to then come in and say, hey, here's a pay rise for you to stay longer, that would be an insult. To me, I'll be insulted if someone did that, because the environment, the culture is so strong and it allows you to be a better version of yourself. Like, anything outside that would just be, yeah, again, insulting. So the thing is, if you did not have that environment, and you flip the switch here and you're like, you turn up to work and you don't feel like you can make a difference, or you're not inspired by the work you're doing, or you can't see the impact you're having, all of a sudden your motivation becomes a bit more extrinsic. You would look for, like, can I get a 4-day working week, for instance, or can I get a pay rise, and so forth. So that's where you can see that cycle start to drip feed into the process.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because if, as say, a business owner or a farm owner, and you're trying to create this, and then you've got a whole lot of staff who are also part of this, I guess, kind of machine, as you call it, and they're used to being intrinsically driven by getting 4-day weeks as the offer to work harder or make more money or moving up the scale. How do you create that culture? Like, I guess you're kind of setting it from a hierarchy point of view, but you're also trying to get people on the journey. How do you create that confidence for your staff as well to actually leap into this new way of doing things?
Yeah. So firstly, again, the why in the story. So that's going to back up very quickly. So the leaders who are holding the space in this approach, they need to kick off with that. The why is so important. Secondly, it's actually framing up to the staff the bigger picture of all this. So, for instance, that journey that was meant to be 2 minutes probably was 20 when I took you through the red to the teal. The teal, like, bringing the bigger picture on board here, saying, hey, this is bigger than not just our organization, not just our industry, but this is actually the momentum of human evolution going forward. Where that happens today, it's going to happen in 20 years from now. Like, this is how we solve the next consciousness. And then from there, it's actually building on something more wide to this if they need it. We call this the fundamental assumptions. So if we listed, and I did this last week actually over the team, and it was mind-blowing how the team were engaged with this. If we listed all the things in today's traditional hierarchy and what owners and managers think of their frontline staff, what would that look like within a hierarchy structure? So, for instance, those at the bottom are unintelligent enough to make decisions because those at the top make decisions on their behalf. They turn up to work for a paycheck. They need a clock because obviously that's the only way you can hold them accountable to clocking in and clocking out. We'll hold back sensitive information. Or sorry, no, here's on. Our frontline members cannot handle sensitive information. Therefore, we will not share the crisis that's happening at the moment or the P&L stuff and so forth. I know there's some sensitive data in there, but even the way we communicate information, we try and soften it, or we're trying to add a positive tone to it just so they don't panic. But it's like, what if they could handle the sensitive information? So then the idea, though, is that if we flip that script to a positive list or another list and said, well, what if people do turn up to work with who are here to contribute, say, more than just a paycheck? What if they turn up as adults, creative, intelligent, and can make decisions on behalf of the company, including financials? And what if our frontline employees can handle sensitive information? If you start listing all the fundamental assumptions of that, and then you look at that and you think, holy heck. Or you look at the previous list and you think, okay, well, if I believe those are the assumptions, which again, there's no right or wrong, but if you believe those are the assumptions, then hierarchy suits that perfectly. No issues there. But if you look at the other list and you think, oh my gosh, like hierarchy does not, at least traditional hierarchy today, does not fit that list. What does, though? Of course, self-management or like a distributed authority model comes in. So if you go through, again, another layer, like the fundamental assumptions behind the why, that gets the buy-in extremely engaged with the team members on board. And what they do now is that those fundamental assumptions, say if you're about to have a conflict with someone, or you need to raise tension with someone, or you need to make a decision, or you have an assumption on someone in the team, you use those fundamental assumptions the team create in the first place to hold them accountable in their belief system of each other. So before you make that call, you say, hang on, our fundamental assumption is that he is trustworthy to do a good job. And that flips the script everywhere. And it's like values on steroids. It's a massive script there. And then you test it. Then you're like, okay, so how does decision-making work? And then usually decision-making is one of the first ones that come to the table. And here's something that everyone can apply today. It's a tool set that was created by a company with 40,000 employees across multiple countries and multiple cultures. So if they can do it, then imagine how much they would unleash straight away within your business. And the idea is simple. If someone has an idea or proposal, they can initiate that. They're the ones that owns that decision. But they have to abide by two steps. One is that they must talk to someone who has experience or expertise in the matter. And secondly, they must talk to someone who is impacted by their decision when they make that. Now it comes all the way back to them to make that decision whether that goes ahead or not, including spending company money. So as an example, like if there's a machine in the farm that had to be bought or whatever the case is, that's their idea to lead that discussion or lead that proposal. They must talk to someone in that matter who's experienced that machine or who's experienced in talking to the bank or whatever the case is. Then it comes back to who's going to be impacted by their decision. And because they're spending company money, I can guarantee it's going to impact many others within the team because the other team members will be thinking, oh, we need this money to spend on recruitment, onboarding, whatever the case is. Like they have the other projects on the way, so they have to discuss that with them. But could you imagine how well informed the individual is now when he's about to make a decision? If it goes ahead with it, fantastic. How much is he or she going to try and make that work and bring it to life? And how much is they going to learn from that experience? And if they fail, what happens then? It's the best learning cycle you could ever possibly ask for. You learn more in that moment than you do 3 years at university. So you start to see how this really builds momentum when you start to unleash potential with the right structures in place.
Oh, absolutely. And failure is the best learner. That's where you do all your growth. Yeah. And I don't think it's something that we should be afraid of. But I think what you've just described is really helps with my next question, or kind of already answers it, is that I've come across farmers regularly who just struggle to delegate to people lower in them in the hierarchy because they don't trust them to make these decisions. But you're flipping that script essentially.
Yeah, 100%. The assumption there is where it started. So the assumption is where we need to address the tension first. And here's the thing is that once the assumption session is done with the team, because the team need to co-own this. Everyone as a collective needs to co-own this. And it could be separate too. Like, For instance, if the leader is struggling to release authority to the team, for lack of a better way of saying it, then sure, we'll do a separate session with that. As in, like, start off with, like, just the basics. What's the fundamental assumptions of your worldview today? What could they look like? What's their imagine if scenario? Like, let's do that and then build that list of what it could look like, and then it starts to make sense, because then it's a way of, it'll be like the blood within an organism. It connects everything together within self-management, and it needs to be strongly adhered to a point where if someone does not abide by that decision-making process, or someone does not abide by the fundamental assumptions, then that is a warning. Or there's real strict measures to this, because it's that important to keep the structure intact, and the trust that's in its place. So yes, it starts with fundamental assumptions, and then it kicks into like, okay, where's the easiest tensions? And it doesn't. And there's easier ways to unleash this too. Like I'm doing something with a client at the moment, saying like, what are you prepared? It's like the traffic light signal. What are you prepared to let go of first? Or what's a heck yes as a green light? What are you comfortable with, but you just want some certain restrictions around first? And then what are you not comfortable with? So again, it could be the green light could be like decision making, but only up to like 5,000 max. A comfortable one but happy to entertain could be like 10,000 max, and then not okay with is like 20,000 max. Like, just as an example, but once you start to unflesh out what that traffic light looks like, what they're comfortable with, what they're not, etc., then that helps build clarity. And then as you see momentum over time, you'll start to see that traffic light signal blow away, and then that unleashes the full autonomy of the team.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I really like that traffic light idea. I'm probably going to steal that some of others. But a key part of this is going to be really communication. So how does communication, does it change in this format, or is there a kind of a strategy that you implement?
Yeah, so you're talking about like information flow within the team? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, great call out. For someone to be fully powerful to make a decision, or of where the matter is, you need information. Yeah, it's just a need. Like, for instance, when you're going for a run, like you want to go at a certain pace, and then you have your Fitbit or whatever watch you have on that gives you the blood pressure, the heart rate, all that stuff. So you can monitor how fast or how slow you need to go and how many kilometers you got left, for instance. Without the information, it's pretty hard to judge what decisions you need to make. The same thing happens within the vital signs of a business. So again, if your organization is an organism, it has vital signs of blood pressure, heart rate, all that stuff there. So those are critical information pieces for the people to make decisions. The thing is, and then that builds into self-correcting systems as well. So I'll give an example. A self-correcting system is solving a thing where it's not having the right rules in place to prevent stuff from going wrong. It's actually what framework can you have in place that's going to allow someone to recognize the tensions about to come up and step in and solve it. So basically, if your organization is a garden, who's going to step up to water it quickly? And the idea here is, so it comes in three components. One is, the first one, what's a healthy or not healthy understanding of the boundary that's in place? Second one is, what information does that individual need or individuals need to address whether it's healthy or not? And the third one is, once you have the information, how are you going to step up to self-correct that problem? Simple as that. So there's a company that basically gave free rein to the employees to travel, fly around the world, and do as they please, because they believe that's going to unleash more initiatives and people would be more proactive. So what they agreed on, this is the team that came together, said, well, if this is the case, a healthy understanding is that, and unhealthy is that, we will not fly business class, we will fly economy. Great, that's the healthy and unhealthy understanding. Now, each month, information comes out to them saying that they get to see everyone's flights and whether it's business or economy. So they can now address that. And now the third thing is that, how does a volunteer task force, in this case, come together to review that process or review the information and then pick out where are the business class versus economy? They then go talk to those who are flying business class and address that with them, saying, hey, that we've noticed you've been having this pattern right now. We agree as a collective to fly economy. Can you please come back to the ways that we've agreed upon? Now, so you're really leveraging adult-to-adult conversations in this instance. And you bet your bottom dollar, it's a lot easier to hide from your boss than it is your colleagues. In fact, it really is. And so here's the thing: is you really are inviting people to stand up and take ownership of it. So then it's back to the question of like what vital signs is appropriate or needed for the team. So we've got a client right now who's saying, look, P&L or the profit and loss statement is there for everyone because we did the shock therapy approach. Therefore, everyone needs to be aware of the impact of decisions, and they need the P&L to make that decisions come to life or not. And so now all of a sudden, rather than all that weight and responsibility on one or two or three individuals, it's a collective across the whole organization. And how much are they going to grow from that? So again, it's the more information that's unlocked, the more power, or people are going to be feeling fully powerful to make a decision, rather than held back information. And it's like being half pregnant in a sense of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that P&L one is a really great example. Like how that would really shift a lot of the way that people work for certain businesses. Like if they actually knew the state the business was in, they might, because I think people generally think if it's a business that's running well, it's making lots of money. But more often than not, particularly in farming, it's pretty fine line on making a profit in a year. So if you have that buy-in, then people's behaviors will also shift around that, and then also start thinking, how can we actually turn this business into a more profitable business? And you start getting these new ideas that are, I guess, being brought to the table as well, which is cool.
100%. And so I've got an example with a farm that we're working with at the moment, and one of the tensions was obviously that the senior leader was it's too stretched, and it's not him or her, it's the system in place. You go to the farm, and the farm have full ownership. They want to make a difference. They want to leave an impact, and they know exactly how to do it as well. So then they come to the meetings and they say, we need X, Y, and Z, like new equipment here or like X, Y, Z, but they haven't got access to the financials of the P&L. And so what their response in return is, no. Like you can't do it. And so there's that tension right there. It's like all of a sudden you're like, well, every time we come with an idea, we just get a no. We don't know why. And so what if they had the why? What if they had access to the why? And then they're like, oh, okay, well, we don't have the budgets for this. I get it. And so therefore, let me think more entrepreneurial way or have more ingenuity to overcome this problem another way. And that builds that psychological ownership from the get-go. So as an example, like that's how information is extremely important and powerful, but there's no right way to address it. It's just simply where's the comfortable levels of the business where it's at and the fundamental assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what advice would you give to, say, farmers or someone who's leading a team who feel like the traditional way of their management is no longer serving their team or their business, or it's not aligned with their purpose? What advice would you give to them for taking their first steps?
Yeah, first steps is asking the question is, are they ready?
Yeah.
Are they seeing cracks in the system, and are they ready for change? That's the first one. The second one would be, why are they on this planet? Why are they farmers? Because I can bet you bottom dollar, like what motivates them to get out of bed in the morning and what makes them go to sleep at night rather than keep them up at night. And here's the thing, and yes, I know money is important. I understand like this, our system is built on money and time, human inventions and so forth, I get it. The thing is though, is that farmers are not in this for the money. Like nurses, they don't become a nurse for the money. Like nurses are in this industry to help patients live healthy, autonomous lives. They were never in it from the money. It's the same with farmers. Like farmers are stewards of the lands. Like you're there for the nature. You're there for the animals. You're there for the ecosystem. And here's the thing: is that these industries that are closer to the nature of where we're working within, those principles just simply need to be applied to the management. And so it's a lot more role model around us than we realize. So the question is maybe I'll rephrase this. 1, what is their purpose? What is their why? 2, what hurts the integrity with the management structure of today? And that will be something that could really help stir up the intrinsic motivation of, I want to make a difference here. This is imperative to who I am, or this is not who I am. And this is not how I believe things can be done. So it helps with it because that's the glue to it. Because if you're in this for the reasons of improving profitability or that X, Y, and Z, then again, that's more the extrinsic motivations rather than intrinsic. But you're dealing with people, and people are going to be the ones that make the biggest difference here. And intrinsic motivation is going to be across everyone. And so yeah, that'll be the key things I'll put forward.
Yeah, I love those. Those are really great pieces to start with. That question around what hurts your integrity about the current management, like that's quite a reflective question to be asking yourself.
Massively, massively, and yeah, never be afraid of what answers come up, and journal it, write it down. Like, being visual is very important, and from my experience with farmers, like we're visual, so absolutely jot it down, have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like in my sessions with my coaching, I use a whiteboard because I might, as soon as you bring out the whiteboard, start drawing stuff on it. Like farmers are really engaged; they can see what you're talking about, take a photo after, and it just makes the process, I guess, more fun and interactive as well.
100%, 100%. And it is, and then once you have that jotted down, it's a lot easier to communicate that with close ones as well, like your partners or even children. Like children are a fantastic one to give you the black and white realization of, or because if you cannot explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. So if a child can understand it, perfect. Like you've got yourself onto a good momentum here. But I think in the day too, like we all know, like we're pulling the short straw. I mentioned at the start, and rather than waiting for the silver bullet to come through, it's actually like, how can we address this worldview or a new worldview to help us transcend into a new way of doing things? And the thing is, it's not theory anymore. Like this was actually created by multiple companies in the world right now that's making a major difference, and results are coming through. But that wasn't the goal of it, to achieve results. It's just like, here's the thing, like if you were to unleash potential, mix that with a deep hunger in the world, and combine that with a purpose that people believe in, growth is going to happen. Like prove me wrong, but that growth is going to happen whether you like it or not. And so what these other businesses experience in terms of results, like one of the companies is projected to save $2 billion in year one. Like these are multi-billion-dollar companies that's already in this progression. So it's not just the small, medium-sized business anymore. It's actually transitioning more than that. And it's what happens every time, like our conscious evolves, so do our organizations. Like an HR department or an IT department or any of those departments, R&D department, they went around 50 years ago. So again, like as we think more innovative, so to our structures, they adapt to that process as well. So again, it's just a question of, are we ready for the next step?
Absolutely. And I guess we've got to ask ourselves that question, and how do we see our businesses evolving and us as a society as well? And we've got to appreciate how far we've come, and the processes 100%. That have got us there. Like it's not just disregard everything; it's evolving that to the next situation. And I talk about this regularly in New Zealand agriculture. We've done really well, thanks to our forefathers, has got us this far. But like, there's actually the opportunity to step into the next evolution, and we're right on the cusp of that. And we're just definitely holding on to what's the current system and all the silver bullets that we're using, and just coming up with same silver bullets with that same consciousness that we got to where we are now. But the actual way of going forward is very similar in the way to which you speak about the management of business and people. It's the same for the management of a farm business, managing our ecosystems and creating a profitable farm business is all linked in the same way.
100%. And to add to your point, there's not, of those worldviews I mentioned, it's not that one's more valid than the other. Yep. They've all got strengths. 100%. We're building on each other's strengths. Like we've got that orange worldview of accountability, how to make money, so forth. Like that's built into our DNA. It's like when you update a computer with software. You never lose the previous software. It's just built into the laptop regardless. And you just add on the extra systems in place to give you more capacity or capability. And so the thing is, and also too, it's like it's not that one worldview is more important than another. It's like comparing a child to a teenager. Like one is not more important than the other. It's just simply that one can do more. One can hold more complex perspectives than the other. And so it's when you look at one problem, you think, okay, so I've got now different worldviews to look at this one problem, and what's the best way to solve this? Just a quickly one here, like I read in decision making, for instance, I read worldview would look at it and say, I say you do, and motivate our fear. And Amber would look at it and say, you will do this because it's the right or wrong way to do it. And they use guilt in that. And Orange worldview would look at it and think, and like, I'm the expert in the matter, and I will negotiate with you if you don't do otherwise. And then there's the Green worldview would look at it and be like, well, in this case, we're going to walk away from here feeling empowered and feeling like we listen to each other to make a decision, but I need you to feel empowered. And then Teal was like, how can we benefit each other to be fully powerful in this situation? So again, like one worldview, looking at one practice or process, it can change the world. Excuse the pun, but it can change the world of this process. It's just knowing which worldview to apply to that process.
I love that. That's a great explanation. So if we look to the next generation of our leaders within the food and fibre industry, what do you think they'll need most to thrive?
A purpose and a structure to fulfill it. So self-management and purpose. And sorry, one more thing, a space to allow them to thrive as who they are, like i.e. wholeness. So it's encompassing more than just your emotional, so your rational side, your emotional, rational, spiritual, etc. And the reason I say that is because so to wake up in the morning and feel inspired to go to work and to be the most curious and creative, you need to feel safe. Like a safe space needs to be provided, because that's also going to allow you to have the right healthy conversations with your team members. It's going to help you to self-reflect on yourself and each other, and so forth. That builds that snowball effect. And the thing is that in today's world, majority of the time, I myself am a victim of this. We're guilty of putting a professional mask on. And we think that mask is who we are. And it's not just the artificial mask, it's also what we wear. We think it defines who we are. And then, which is like you go to work, and sense of belonging is how humans survive, basically, as well, or one component of that. So when you go to work, you're putting on a professional mask because you think this is the version of yourself you need to be. And then when you come home, you forget to take it off. So, but the thing is, like, that is just a small part of who you are. If anything, you're so much more than that. So how can we actually unleash all of that of who you are within the working environment? So you cannot distinguish work from home, basically, unless home is not not the safe space. But like, you get the point. Like, you need to really thrive. And then imagine having that individual pursuing a purpose that they believe in, and having the power to do it. Like, whoa. And then multiply that by how many people in the business, 50, 100, whatever the case is. That's intimidating in a very positive way.
Yeah, that'd be very hard to stop in my mind.
Yeah.
I love that idea around authenticity, and something I try to bring to my business. And it's funny that you feel like you have to almost practice your own authenticity in this world now. But there's so much power when you do show up, and people almost magnetize to you when you do that. Yes. So I'm fully behind that. I think once you give the people the power and the space to be themselves, like, you're really onto something that could be world changing, as you say.
Massively. It unleashes so much. Really does. To a point, like, it helps you hold the right conflict discussions that you need to have. It really encourages you to fulfill who you are. And that's the thing, is like, why live a life not fulfilling your maximum potential? It's who you are. And that's the thing, is like, sometimes it takes a structural difference to make it happen. Sometimes it takes a cultural difference. Sometimes it takes a mindset difference. Like, sometimes all the above. If we can role model that with a few organizations like this, that's not going to set just an example for the industry, but for the whole world. Like all these other organizations are doing right now. So it's a very powerful journey, and we've got the potential to do it. And the reason I'm so confident in this is because the studies show it. We are destined to evolve.
Absolutely, and we definitely feel like we're right on the precipice of that. So I wrap up my podcast with a question for everyone, and that is, what is a force of nature to you?
The fact that it provides the space to challenge the status quo, I think, stands for everything. I think it's a voice to make the invisible visible, and I also believe that it stands for something that provides hope and purpose and guidance. So, I've heard a few people around me already saying that they listen to this podcast for the same reasons. It's for inspiration. It's to drive something that is something more powerful and purposeful than themselves. And you know what? A light bulb was not made from continuous improvements of a candle. and sometimes you just got to listen to something like this to make a difference. And this is where momentum starts. And so the force of nature holds that.
I love that. So for the listeners who want to learn a bit more about your work or connect with you, what's the best way to get in touch, Nick?
So my Iceberg, so a company called Iceberg, it's iceberg.com. Connect with me on there. LinkedIn, another easier platform, Nic Thompson, Nic, Thompson without a P. Nic, actually, I was too lazy to put the K in there. So otherwise reach out by yourself and connect with me as well. So yeah, easy ways.
Yeah, and the links will be below on the podcast. But thank you very much for your time today, Nick. I have really enjoyed this, and I'm sure we will be working together in future. I learn a lot from you every time we've chatted. And yeah, I'm really excited about this way of bringing this style of management to business.
Amazing. Thanks, Conan. Really appreciate this opportunity. And we can land it with one individual out there at least, and we've done our job.
Absolutely.